Avoidants will typically not change their attachment style for their partners, even when they know that that partner is exactly what they want and need in their life. This can be very confusing and frustrating for someone who's going through this because they essentially look at this avoidant partner and they can see the value that they bring into their life, and they can see glimpses of when they don't allow that avoidant attachment style to come up, where the relationship is awesome, everything's working out, you guys are thriving, but the moment that you guys get a little bit too deep, or there's some type of touchy subject that causes that trigger, they pull away. And they never seem to want to change that attachment style when you try to bring it up and show them, like, hey, we were good, like we were fine, but the moment that, I did this or that, you pulled away. And this is something that I think we should try to work through. And the more that you try to press them on that, the more they pull away, because that's something that's going to require them to dig deep and to essentially try to work on these things and bring up emotions that they don't want to experience. So they're going to naturally react that way. But it's very frustrating to you because you would think that someone who would be experiencing that type of love, that type of commitment, and to see the value that you bring into their life, because don't let them fool you. They do see the value that you bring into their life. But what happens is that they let that avoidant attachment style in those situations take over. And when it does, they're not critically thinking to see, this is something I need to work through and I need to work on, because if not, I'm going to lose the love of my life, someone that's perfect for me. But they have been so conditioned to believe that this behavior is acceptable because they've had to, right? Like when they were growing up at a young age, they essentially had to adopt this way of thinking and being in order to essentially feel good or better about how their caregiver was not meeting their emotional needs. Because when it comes to avoidant, we know that typically what happens here is that at a young age, their caregiver wasn't expressing the type of love and commitment and care that they would expect to meet their emotional needs. So they've adopted this way of being to make themselves kind of compensate for that. So this is something that is very automatic because this is something that they've only known. So in these cases, when this is happening, they are reverting back to that programming and believing that this is the way to be, that they have to be this way because that's how they protected themselves. And any positive emotion that comes up can be a threat to them, right? And for whatever reason, they have twisted that emotion as a negative thing and they want to avoid. So even though they realize that they could lose someone that is so great for them, they are going to essentially not want to make that change because this is very difficult for them, right? Also, what change requires is it requires them to dig deep. They're going to have to dig deep and bring up those emotions that are unwanted and go back to those memories of, that caregiver not providing that emotional support that they were looking for. So they of course are trying to avoid that, and they know that in order to make that change they're gonna have to go there. So while you are pointing out maybe different cases of like seeing like this is something that's really detrimental to the relationship, the way that your attachment style is, like we need to try to work through this, and they are so quick to push back because they don't want to go there. They don't want to dig deep and to work on these things because they know that it's going to bring up a lot of unwanted emotion and processing, and they know that this is going to potentially take a long time, right? Because this didn't happen overnight. This happened over a long period of time. In order to unwind those things, it's going to take probably a little bit longer than they would expect. So to them, they don't want to go down this route, right? It's more risky for them to want to change than it is for them to stay the way that they are, right? This is what they've known for a very long time. They're comfortable here, so it's like, why would I change this way? And again, like we've said earlier, like they've justified their way of being, right? They've made themselves genuinely believe that this is okay to be because of how they were. And what that does too is that it makes them fear that they're losing themselves, because being avoided to them, whether we can see that it is a negative thing, to them it's a part of who they are, right? This is how they were for a very long time, and if they let go of this way of being, they're going to have to start from the ground up, right? Which you and I know that that is exactly what you want to do, because when doing that, they're going to be able to rebuild themselves in a more healthy and sustainable way so that they can have a genuine relationship and connection with you. But to them, that is such a threat, because it's like, okay, well, if I do this, I don't know who I'm going to be anymore. I don't have any control. And if we can remember, like with an avoidant, they want to maintain control at all times, right? So this is very scary for them because they don't know who they're going to be. They don't know how to even navigate this, right? So this, when they think about that, this is like something again where they look at and they're like, you know what? I've just been this way for so long. Like I'm just going to continue to be this way. There's no sense in me trying to figure out myself and to work on myself because this is going to be too challenging. It's just not worth it. I don't think the way that I am is a problem, essentially. So that tends to be what they're telling themselves to convince themselves to stay this way. But this is just an excuse, right? Like they think it's legitimate as a reason as to why they can stay the way that they are. But in actuality, we all know that this is just an excuse to not do the difficult thing, right? It's easier to stay the way that they are and continue the same pattern. Like anyone, right? Whenever we're all trying to work on something that is a bad habit, like we convinced ourselves that this was okay because it's easier to just accept ourselves the way that we are in that regard and not make those changes. And that is especially true when you're looking at an avoidant because again, they're trying to stay the way that they are because that maintains some sense of control to them. So I know that you might be looking at all of this as a reflection of you and not being able to convince them of looking at the love that you have brought to them and caring for them and seeing that they're not appreciating all of that. It really can hurt you and tear you down. But I want you to understand that this has little to nothing to do with you, right? Again, there is a part of them that genuinely does see the value that you bring into their life. They do see all the things that you're doing because that is what you've done since day one. But they are allowing this avoidant attachment style to take over and to essentially cause them to be this way. And in those moments where you're trying to express love and you're trying to open up, and it does suck because you know that when things are good, they're really good, right? You guys are really seeming to head into a right direction. It's awesome. It's great in so many different ways. But when you tend to get to that point where you trigger that avoidant attachment style by trying to get close to them or just being the way that you are, doing something natural in a relationship, it causes them to pull away. And it can be so very frustrating because you just don't know why this person is continuing to allow this to happen. And it's so frustrating to continuously have them pull away in these moments. I know you come from a pure heart in the sense that you want to do everything that you can to change them and to just allow them to finally get through this attachment style so you guys can actually continue that good times and just have a healthier relationship together. But they essentially have to come to the realization that it's time for them to work through this. It's time for them to figure out what exactly caused this to happen and to work through that. And that's what's going to allow them to actually make the change. But that's something that you can't control. You can't control anyone in this world besides yourself. And that's what you need to focus on. You need to focus on what you need to do that's going to best support you. I hope you did enjoy today's video. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.